Let's talk about the other team from Los Angeles. Let's go to USC. Lincoln Riley in his third season. Maybe a little bit of a disappointing season last year after you had a quarterback that was a generational prospect, number one drafted overall the year before. He was a Heisman Trophy winner. You finally got rid of Al Grinch. And you got the defensive coordinator who was the defensive coordinator in the other school at LA, UCLA. Thank you once again to Sean Foster for telling us that UCLA was in Los Angeles. Would have never known. Would have never known that the University of California, Los Angeles was in Los Angeles. So thank you. But yeah, I mean, this offense is still going to be really good. Miller Moss is a fantastic quarterback, by the way. Like in the limited time that we've seen him, Miller Moss is a very good quarterback. And then you're like, okay, in the quarterback room, like, oh, what's behind Miller Moss? Jaden Mayava, right? And of
God
course,
damn it, man.
great, both great talents that they have there in that quarterback room. I love it. I love it. And then not to mention, I mean, running back room looks good. Uh, the wide receiver room looks good. I mean, just his offense is still going to be very good, and we'll get to all of it, right? But I mean, Miller Moss and Jaden Malva, like to have those two guys as your quarterbacks, like you have two legitimate starting quarterbacks on your team, which is very nice.
Listen, I'll say last year there was a time point in the season where it looked like you were going to be going from Caleb Williams to Will Howard, and now you're at holy shit. Yeah, we forgot Miller Moss is a really good quarterback, and you also have Maeva for depth and the future of that room. Holy cow! I think Ohio State would trade in a heartbeat Miller Moss and Maeva for a guy like Will Howard for sure. For sure, I think he's a guy that really impressed in that
Even
bowl
though
game.
Lincoln
He was a
Riley
good
wanted
second.
Will Howard,
Well, listen, I like Will Howard, but I think Miller Moss. I feel good about Miller Moss. What he did in that bowl game. We'll see. I mean, and there's a reason why like Will Howard's not at USC. I think if Lincoln Riley wanted him, I'm sure he could have gotten him. And this team is also going to be super talented around him. I think he's going to be able to use a plethora of weapons along that wide receiver room and even out of the backfield as well to his advantage. Now, here's what I'll say this, and listen, USC fans, I really high on Moss, I'm high on Maeva, I'm high on this offense and this team as well. Everyone keeps saying, "Oh, this offense, it's going to be more structured, it's going to be better, it's going to be more fluid because he's going to play in system. He's going to let Lincoln Riley, do his thing and scheme guys." I don't know how you can upgrade from Caleb Williams because he was so good. And I know he made some mistakes. And I know that Notre Dame game was not great, but he was a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. He's the first overall pick. He is really flashing for the Bears right now. I mean, listen, not that I'm Debbie Downer on Miller Moss. I'm not at all, but I do want to just calm down for a second. Let's be realistic about this. Like, Caleb Williams was unbelievable, generational type talent. Miller Moss is very talented, yes, but is he going to beat Caleb Williams? No, but that's okay. You could still win a lot of football games with Miller Moss. He's still a talented kid. He's still going to be drafted in the NFL. I mean, you saw what he did against Louisville. He could still put up a ton of points for you, and I think that's the excitement on this team and around this offense, and it's totally justified. It's absolutely justified.
the running back room is really good too. Woody Marks is a really good football player. I know he didn't get a ton of carries last year in that Mississippi State offense, or as a matter of fact, any year, but he was such a focal point of that offense. Woody Marks, Jaquavius Marks, is really good, right? I don't know that he's Marshawn Lloyd, right? Marshawn Lloyd was really good for you last year.
Yes.
Really good for you. I mean, to the point where, I mean, your rushing attack, you only ran the ball 42% of the time, which is wild. And you're still averaging 4.8 yards per carry. You still averaged 133 yards per game despite only running the ball 42% of the time, which is like bottom 10 in the country. Jaquavius Marks is very good. Quinn Joyner is a younger guy who, I believe in the talent of him. Marion Peterson, I believe in the talent of him as well. I think those three guys kind of form a nice little pair and a spare that we talk about on this channel a lot. Having that pair, Woody Marks and then Quinn Joyner, and then having that Marion Peterson spell back that you can go to if you need to, or if some injuries happen as well.
No, I'm with you too. Absolutely. I mean, Marks I thought he was the bright spot on that Mississippi State team last year. I thought what he can do out of the backfield is something that I'm sure Lincoln Riley is really going to enjoy, and I'm sure that's what attracted him to Woody Marks. And Joyner's explosiveness is obviously something that is no mistake, no secret at all. He's going to be a guy that's going to be able to really flash and make some plays for you. I like it, and I also like being able to run the football, man. I mean, give Moss and Maeva take less off their plate because yes, they're very, very good, but it helps to have a good running back. It helps to have a good running back. I'm sorry, running game. And just open up the offense and let those receivers go. I mean, let's talk about them. Zachariah Branch, Deuce
Yeah.
Robinson, Makai Lemon, Jacoby Lane, Kyle Ford, Karen Hudson, Jay Fair, Charles Ross, Xavier Jordan. I mean, the list goes on and on of talented and a beautiful mix, a beautiful blend of uber talented and experienced bodies, and also different body types with Branch and Robinson, Lemon Lane. I mean, you can mix and match, you can be versatile. You got guys that can run all different routes. What the possibilities are endless for what Lincoln Riley can do. What they did in that 2023 recruiting class is hit on 4 receivers, and that does not happen often. That is exciting to see. And listen, I mean, Taj Washington, very, very good player. I thought Brendan Rice disappointed me after a promising start to his career at Colorado. Mario Williams, not quite the guy I thought he was going to be as well coming up from Oklahoma. I thought you missed Jordan Addison last year, and you missed a really alpha or an elite wide receiver room. And to me, this looks like it. To me, I put it up there, and it's not quite ahead of Oregon and Ohio State just because there's a little bit of unknown in terms of like heavy workload, longevity, a big sample size from some of these guys, but it's a really talented room. You want to talk a little bit more about it?
No, you hit all of the names. I mean, I've been like Zach Branch is so different. Deuce Robinson is so different, man. Like those guys are elite, elite NFL prospect talents, and they're just sophomores, man. Makai Lemon as well, Jacoby Lane, like sophomores, and they're so good. That wide receiver room is going to be good this year. It's going to be good next year, and as long as Lincoln Riley's there, I can count on that wide receiver room being pretty good for the years to come after that, as long as he's over there at USC. In the tight end room, Lake McCree, I mean, 26 receptions on 30 targets, solid. Seems like he was a pretty decent option. I don't know really what the rest of this tight end room is going to look like. Not necessarily a focal point of any offense that Lincoln Riley is going to be running. So, sure, in the wide receiver room, you lose Taj Washington and Brendan Rice. Um, I think you still have unbelievable talent in your wide receiver room, and Lake McCree is going to get you what you need in
Yeah,
that tight
I'm
end
with you
room.
to it. And Zachariah Branch, I know he's a special teams guy, but please have him play more offense. I mean, there is no reason he should only be playing 250 snaps. He was better than Singer last year. He was better than Rice. I don't know what that was all about, but I think he steps into a bigger role. I honestly, I don't know. Is Jacoby Lane? He might be the best out of all of them, at least in terms of just like complete wide receivers, like run any route, get open whenever you want. Yeah, what an exciting group to have for Miller Moss to walk into. And by the way, I mean I heard it somewhere where all these. I mean they lost what their top their 3 wide receivers last year, and or maybe
Doesn't
4
matter.
if you count Mario Williams. It doesn't matter, but also like these guys, those sophomores were with the second team running with Miller Moss, and the connection and the continuity, the chemistry is there with those guys, and you saw it in the bowl game. And I mean, it's pretty exciting. And finally, you look at their schedule and you see some of those, toss up games, and it's like, where are these teams weak at? It's like, oh, secondary, maybe pass rush here, and it's like they could really take advantage, and that's where they could separate themselves from these teams.
When I look at their offensive line, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving pieces there. When I look at it, and I looked at it really hard, and I'm like, and I wanted to like it, but the thing that kept coming back to Christopher 0 transfers on the offensive line.
Yes.
Not a
Great point.
single one. Not a single one. And that is intentional because we know if Lincoln Riley sees a hole on the team, he is going to go get transfer portal. Like he's going to go get guys. They're going to fill that spot. Maybe at a replacement level. In certain instances, they become elite. But the fact that he did not go in the transfer portal and explicitly pick out guys in the offensive line tells me that he's not panicking. He believes in this offensive line, and so does the rest of the coaching staff. So I'm in on this offensive line being good. Not necessarily because I'm an elite evaluator of this talent on this team, or I know that all these moving parts on this offensive line are going to be good. This is a vibes. This is the fact. I just think that that's a really important thing to look at.
Yeah, I'm first of all to our audience. I want to apologize for that outburst there. I was probably not super pleasant, but I'm glad he made that point. I mean, Lance Hurd, they could have gone out and gotten a guy like Lance Hurd, right? I mean, 5-star kid from LSU. Went to Tennessee, like they were pieces in the portal. I know offensive line is not a place where you want to be searching for in the portal, but they could have gotten pieces, and they had before Pregnon. They've gotten guys along that offensive line from the portal, and you hit it right in the nose. I mean, Elijah Page is uber talented. That is exactly what you want your offensive tackle to look and move like. Now we'll see how he puts it together in year 2. You know, him and Noah, right? Two young kids. We'll see how they look like, but I feel pretty good. And Jonah Monheim, another guy that is just physical and was good sliding down to center. I'm so
From
sorry.
tackle, and he was
He,
really good at tackle.
yeah,
He was
he
good at
looks good
tackle.
there. Yeah, to me, I'm all for this offensive line. Now the depth is definitely something that concerns me. I would have liked to see them maybe add some depth pieces in the portal, but
But
again,
they
that's almost even
didn't.
harder. But I know, but again, yes, but I would have liked to see just a little bit more stability there. And maybe I'm wrong, and I'm sure they know their roster better than I do, but um, it's it's pretty exciting, and I think keeping a guy upright like Miller Moss and listen, I love Caleb Williams, right, Bears fan, but he does sometimes make it harder on his offensive line the way he can move around in a pocket, right? He's got really good pocket presence, but he also the way he kind of moves around and extends plays, it can be tough to block for him, and that's where you lead the holding calls. That's where you get sacks. That's where you take a drop back and you don't know where your quarterback is because he is so elusive and so creative. But Miller Moss is much more structured in terms of I'm going to be right here in my drop set. I'm just going to be right here, and you just got to get to your spot as an offensive tackle. And I think that's where Page and Murphy, can benefit from the change in quarterback.
When I look at this defense, I'm seeing at least in the front 7 some movement, some new pieces, right? Not enough like that's entirely shaking up the core of that front 7. And the front 7 was really bad, and a huge part of it was effort from Bear Alexander, effort from your line. Mason Cobb was not good last year. I know that USC fans thought that he was going to be good. He was not good for you last year. Now, he still is a guy with a lot of experience. I think, maybe Bear Alexander can fix some of those effort issues. Maybe Anthony Lucas can make a step on that offensive line and kind of live up to that, high 4-star billing that he had. I'm still looking at this front 7, and I'm still concerned about it. In the secondary, ironically, I feel pretty good about the secondary, actually. I like a lot of the transfer portal pieces that they brought in there. But on the defensive line, and look, when I look at this defensive line, right, I see piece after piece after piece after piece. I'm like, okay, that's like a good player. That's like a good player. That's a good player. And it just didn't come together last year. And, some of that was coaching, some of it was effort. And I don't know how or when that's going to get fixed or if it will get fixed. So the fact that they're still kind of like Dan Lynn is kind of running it back with a lot of these guys in the front 7 kind of tells me that maybe he likes the talent in this front 7, but I'm not sure. I'm not super confident in this front 7, and I think you need to have a high effort, highly physical, high motor front 7 if you're going to succeed in the Big Ten.
I do think the talent is there. I mean, you
Correct.
mentioned it where like it's the names are good, right? And everything on paper seemed like, okay, yeah, maybe this is why Grinch is running it back one more time, or Riley's running it back one more time with Grinch, but it didn't pan out. And then you lose Height and Corey Foreman, you transfer out of there, and we'll see how they really feel those pieces on the edge there, or feel those departures. But Jamil Muhammad, right, is just a solid player, right? He's the guy you're hoping that has that high motor, can be a leader in that room. Is Brylan Shelby? Is he going to take a jump in year 2? Anthony Lucas, where is Anthony Lucas? He was a guy that, first of all, was high on when A&M got him. I thought he flashed well as a freshman. I loved when USC went out and got him, and they just didn't use him. I don't know what about it. Was he hurt? Was he battling injuries? Did he not fit in that system? He's a fun kid, 6'5", 275, athletic, former 5-star. I mean, I feel good in Danton Lynn to put him in position to succeed because he's a guy that I think you need to. And Tuliopao, right? He's got to stay healthy, right? Cameron Fountain's a young, talented kid. Abasari from Minnesota. He's a talented young kid. I don't know how much those guys are really ready to play, but both those kids got bodies ready to play. I mean, Abasari, he put on weight. He looks good, right? As a young kid coming in to USC, and then interior. Bear Alexander. I listen, he gets a lot of hate because he almost entered the portal and he didn't, and it sounds like he left Georgia and he almost gets a bad rep in terms of what he does off the field, and I don't quite know if much to that. I'm not going to bury a kid just because of all that. It's kind of speculation and all that stuff, but he's also 19, 18, 19 years old. I mean, he's still a young kid developing, growing. Sounds like he's impressing this offseason. It sounds like he's still getting more and more consistent on and off the field. Remember, he's just a junior. He's just going to be a true junior. So he's still a young kid. If he can put it together more consistently, that would work wonders for the rest of the guys in this room who are solid players, but do not have the upside of Bear Alexander. But listen, Kobe Pepe, he's a guy I know USC fans. I mean, he kind of coming out of nowhere this offseason, right? But he's 6'2", 315. We'll see because sometimes you fall in love with these guys that going crazy in fall camp. But if he could step up, he would be a massive step at nose tackle to eat up some blocks in the middle of that defense and let those athletic linebackers run free. Gavin Myers, another guy, played a good amount at Wyoming. Nate Clifton was a team captain for Vandy. He could start and give you a bunch of production. Again, like it's been the past couple years, there are names in this room. I think the depth is there. It's going to be up to Coach Henderson to get the most out of them. And I guess it's a wait and see type process. But where I sit here today, I have to believe that this defensive line is better than it was a year ago. Is that right? And if it's not, it
I
could be
hope
a long
so.
year with
I
that
hope so.
schedule.
I mean, look, Bear Alexander, and I'll say this again, like down to down effort was an issue, right? But he also played 660 snaps. Like, not everyone is Deion Walker and like can play one tech at like a dominant level for 700 snaps. Like, maybe Alex Grinch was just like fighting for his job and leaving his best players on the field. Like, if Bear Alexander like only played like 500 snaps, 480 snaps, like maybe we would see more down to down effort from him. Maybe it was just a conditioning thing. Maybe that gets fixed, with like one more offseason. He is 315 pounds. Uh, we'll see. Jamil Muhammad is a good player too. Really good player. That was a great get for them. Um, a
What's
little
your
while
take on
back.
Anthony Lucas, real quick? I mean, you're an Aggie.
I mean,
I know you
like,
didn't get much of him. You only had a year of him, but what?
I'm not sure run defense wise, right? Like, I'm not sure if he can really play 5 tech like on early downs, right? And like you saw him like last year, even and on a like third down pass rush, like he had like almost a 10% pressure rate, last year, which is, by the way, awesome. Awesome. And he has that athletic profile to be an elite pass rusher. And I think they just like using him more in that aspect. And I just don't think Anthony Lucas is a 3 down guy. I think he is a pass rush specialist. And that's okay. And they're gonna have other guys on this defensive line that can play, the first first and second down, and be an impact in that run game. He feels like he kind of gets moved around a little bit. He's very fast and bendy, and that's what makes him a good pass rusher. It's just being fast and bendy doesn't help you in the run game. It doesn't. Sometimes it can if you use it properly and you're physical and you're strong and you fill in the right gaps and you know you're using technique. It just doesn't feel like it's there for him. At least it hasn't been these last 2 years. The linebacker room, I talked about it before. It's not good last. Like Mason Cobb was bad. Like he got taken out in some games. He was not good. He was not good. Despite playing 772 snaps, he was very bad last year. Eric Gentry also played a lot of snaps last year. You bring in Easton Mascarenas Arnold from Oregon State. Now, the last Oregon State linebacker, Omar Spacer, transfer out there, ended up being terrible for LSU. I don't anticipate this being the situation with Mascarenas Arnold. I think he's a good player. I don't know if he's going to play Mike or if Mason Cobb is going to play Mike, but my speculation is that Mascarenas Arnold will play Mike and Mason Cobb will play some Will there. We'll see how that turns out for them. I mean, in D'Antlin's 4-2-5, it's going to probably be those two. I would imagine Eric Gentry gets some snaps as well, maybe Rayshawn Davis as well. I don't know. I don't know how the snap counts are going to differentiate. I mean, it felt like Alex Grinch was just like leaving guys out there a lot, but we'll see, I guess. We'll see. I'm not super confident in Mason Cobb just after what I saw last year. Even though we saw some good things in 2022, it just feels like the pieces are there in the front secondary, and maybe Dan Lynn can get it out of them, but it just really felt like they were missing tackles. It felt like it was low effort. They were in the wrong spots, and maybe a lot of that's just coaching, and maybe that can get fixed in one offseason, but maybe it can't, right? So I hope that Easton Mascarenas Arnold can provide some sort of spark in that front seven. And sometimes Mike linebackers can do that. If you have a really good Mike linebacker and you just put the talent on your team in the right positions to make plays, like it can make a huge, huge difference. Because as someone who played Mike, right, like how important it is to get everyone on the same page and in the right position. And not just so you as a Mike can make players, but so that you're very talented athletes around you are also in the positions to make plays as well.
Absolutely. And that's where I look to a guy like Eric Gentry. That's the guy I like as an athlete, a talented player where they can move him around and do things and let him roam free. If you've got a guy like EMA in the mic and if he stabilizes that position, you nailed it on the head. Absolutely. To me, Mason Cobb, yes, I don't think he is the linchpin. Right? If he jumps back to Oklahoma State, Cobb, I mean, great. That's just gravy, right? But Gentry to me I think is going to be that guy to step up and could be a real difference maker on this team, put in a position to just fly around and make plays if you've got stability at Mike. And that's credit to them for bringing in very talented Pac-12 kid as well who's got good experience. So we'll see. And I also think like it does help if you have stability up front and if you're blocking, if you're stuffing run lanes like Kobe Pepe and Bear Alexander, if those guys can do their job up front, win on early downs, I think it's really nice.
This secondary, I mean, obviously large overhaul. You bring in 5 different transfers, but I like the guys that they brought in, like John Humphrey and Kamar Ramsey, who are following Dan Lynn from UCLA. I know we talked about UCLA secondary not being great last year. Like these were 2 bright spots. Like John Humphrey is a really good cornerback, and then Achille Arnold coming over from Oregon State as well. It's pretty solid in the secondary there. 49 tackles, 3 pass breakups, 2 interceptions. Guy who's pretty experienced there. I think those 3 guys, bringing them in, like those are pretty good DBs, right? And you combine that with Dan Lynn, I think the secondary is going to improve a lot, and I feel pretty good. Now, the secondary, I don't think was necessarily the worst part of this defense last year. Like I mentioned, I thought the front 7 was just absolutely atrocious, which caused them to be terrible in the red zone, terrible on third down because they were in third and shorts all the time. The run defense was terrible. I mean, I just thought that having a bad front 7 just led to so many other problems Um, even though an overhaul was also needed in the secondary, I think they did a good job getting really good pieces.
Yeah, and normally I look around, I'm like, okay, you bring in 5 transfers, and it's like, they're all might have to play a good amount, and that's never a great thing. But Kamar Ramsey, John Humphrey, like, yes, they're transfers, but they're not really. They're proven guys in this system, in that conference, or at least at the Power Five level, which is nice to see. You mentioned Arnold Nicholson coming over from Mississippi State, Grady Vance as well. To me, I look at some of the returning guys and guys that hopefully you're seeing take a step with new staff, another year in the weight room, another year in college football. Jacoby Covington, more of a veteran type player. Excuse me. Prophet Brown, a guy I think he played well in that bowl game. How about Marcellus Williams? Not necessarily a veteran kid, but a young guy. It sounds like he's really exciting them in camp so far. I don't know how much he'll give you in 2024, but in beyond. And if you need him in a pinch in certain desired depth situations, good to have a body like that in the room, in the cornerback room. And then how about Bryson Shaw, 50-year guy, former Ohio State guy, I believe. Uh, solid depth, right? And then how do the young guys progress behind that? That's a wait and see type thing. Hopefully, you don't need them this year, and you can just kind of let them sit and develop and do their thing on their own time. But listen, this defense again. I mean, it's a talented defense. I think it's more talented than it's been. I will say this, and I think it's more experienced than it's been, and I think it's going to have as better coaching than it's had in a while. And to me, those three things, it's a good recipe. And now, how much can you overhaul a terrible defense in one offseason? It's going to be tough. And the expectations should not be, oh, this is going to be a top 30 defense. If it is, that's great. I mean, it still might not even matter because this schedule is so brutal, but it would do wonders for you. And I think you're going to start to see the ceiling of this USC team hit. We've talked about for years. Everyone knows it's about this defense and how can this defense get going and how's physicality? Do they hold up depth, running, stopping the run, getting off the field on third down? They had that one year where they went 11-1, right? But they turnover. It was just turnover luck, not just turnover, but it was a lot of turnover luck, and that was a big part of it. You want to be able to get off the field on your own dime, not just because of a tip ball, not just because of you pop the ball loose from somebody or a strip sack. It's more about getting off consistently, and that travels week to week. That travels year to year, and I guess it remains to be seen. But the pieces are in place, and Lincoln Riley did everything he needed to do this offseason, start that process and that healing, fix it. And I guess we'll see what happens. But real quick though, on the defense side, I want to ask you, a lot has been made of this defense and this offseason. What can this defense struggle but show promise at times, and you can still be like, okay, the pieces are there, and like what are you looking for this year in this defense? Is it just like, okay, they need to win this amount of games, they need to have this many turnovers, this many or it's just like, okay, you see the effort, you see the eye test, and it's kind of like, this looks different than last year. The results aren't quite there yet, but it seems like it could be trending in that direction. What do you want to see this year?
I want to see physicality from the front seven. That's it. If I see nothing else but physicality from the front seven, I think that is a huge, huge improvement. And I think it'll work wonders. Just establishing that kind of culture in your defense is just so important. In the Big Ten, like where you're gonna have to go on the road, like in November to Lincoln, Nebraska, or in different years,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have to travel to Madison, Wisconsin, and play in absolutely freezing cold weather. It is going to be like the Big Ten is a physical conference, and you are not going to compete if you can't be physical. Even some of the bottom feeders, not the bottom feeders, but some of like the lower tier 3 teams in the Big Ten are very physical. I would call Iowa a tier 3 team. I'd call Wisconsin a tier 3 team. Physical teams, and those physical teams, that's when they've been at their best, you know, and they've bred cultures of being physical, and you're gonna drop some games that you shouldn't drop in the Big Ten if you aren't physical. So let's talk about their schedule. I mean, over under win totals are at 7.5 in most places. You start the season with LSU in Las Vegas. You're like a touchdown dog in that game. You get Utah State at home the next week. Bye at Michigan, Wisconsin at home, at Minnesota, Penn State at home, at Maryland, Rutgers at home, at Washington. You get a bye. Nebraska at home, at UCLA, then Notre Dame at home. I know the schedule is brutal. I think it's brutal because of their out of conference, right? Like getting LSU, Notre Dame, out of conference is tough. All right. But I think we had someone in our comment section when we talked about the Florida schedule being the toughest in the country, and they said that this USC schedule is harder than that. I could not disagree more. I think there are so many winnable games on the schedule. Um, any schedule with Utah State, Minnesota, Rutgers, Nebraska, and UCLA is not a historically tough schedule. It is a historically tough out of conference schedule, I think, for a Big Ten team where you're only playing 3 out of conference games. I think Michigan on the road is tough because it's a physical game. Minnesota's nice on the road because you get it early in the season instead of getting it late in the season. Um, Washington on the road and UCLA on the road, getting 2 of those games where you don't have to leave the West Coast as your road games, I think is huge. I think at Maryland is kind of a sneaky tough game. I'm ready. I'm ready for this over 7.5. I like this USC team to improve defensively, and I do think that the offense is not going to see a significant drop off. Despite I know Caleb Williams was nuts. I know he was. I think this wide receiver room is better. I think this offensive line has a chance to be better. I think that running back room with Jaquavius Marks is still really good, and I believe in Miller Moss. I think he's really good. And like you said, and this was a point that hadn't even thought of until you brought it up, but the chemistry between Miller Moss and those twos from last year, it's just going to translate. I really like that point that you made there. I'm going to ride with you on that. So over 7.5. I believe you can mostly get that at -105. Not that I'm betting this, but I think you can get wins against Utah State. I think you can beat Wisconsin at home. I think you can beat Minnesota. I think you can beat Rutgers. I think you can beat Washington, Nebraska, UCLA. That's already 7. And then you just got to find one more somewhere.
Yeah, to me, I thought I was gonna be on the under, but I'm gonna go over here just because I like what I'm hearing out of fall camp so far. I'm not gonna bet it just because this schedule, it is a tough schedule. It
It
really
is.
is a tough
I wasn't
schedule.
trying
And
to
so
devalue it. Yep.
attrition can be tough, but I do think they've got depth at some nice spots. Now we'll see about the O line. I know you mentioned they didn't take any transfers, but again, it'll be an experience there, no matter what. So I guess that depends on injuries, whatnot. But listen, I mean, you mentioned it. There are 7 games that you should win, and then it's about LSU, Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State, Notre Dame. A lot of those games are at home or neutral site. I believe is that the LSU game? That's that in Vegas, right?
It's in base. Yep.
Yeah, on Sunday night. That'll be a fun one. That's standalone.
I can't wait.
LSU but LSU has not won week 1 since 2019. They have lost a lot of opening games. I know a lot of that was at O, but I'm just saying, when you want to get LSU, you get them early, and
Hey,
they're
LSU or
replacing a lot there.
USC plus 6.5. We'll see if I sprinkle that. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
I don't. LSU's a team I could see losing more than people think. But yeah, I'm. Let's do it, man. This USC team. And by the way, if you go 8-4, and I know USC fans expect more, and they should. They absolutely should, especially in year 3 in Lincoln Riley. You shouldn't be going backwards, but I do think, like Matthew talked about with the defense, like there are things that you can take away no matter what the record is. It's like, okay, fine. We're doing the right things. We're building a foundation, maybe 1 step back, 2 steps forward in the next couple of years where you're getting to a spot where USC can be an annual contender. There's no reason they should not be in the tier 1 of the Big Ten for years to come, right there with Oregon and Ohio State. And we'll see what happens with Michigan and Penn State. Like they should be right there. The problem is they get Penn State and Michigan this year. Out of conference is brutal with Notre Dame and LSU. Exciting though. Very, very exciting games and whatnot. But to me, I think that Notre Dame game, I think that's super winnable because your back half of your schedule, yes, there's some physical teams like there, Rutgers and Nebraska, but there's a lot of pretty winnable football games that you could be winning by a good amount, not have to really, really exert a ton of effort for. and you've got that bye in the middle of November, I guess early November, where
And
you could be somewhat fresh going into Notre Dame, fresher than maybe you would think after a tough schedule.
and that I don't think people are ready for that Notre Dame offensive line to be not that great. But yeah, I mean that could play into your hands really nicely because if you're playing a team that's already attritioned injury wise on the offensive line and you get them in November at the end of the season, who knows what other kind of, like you said, attrition, but specifically attrition on that offensive line.